If you stray outside the designated areas, you will be removed from the island.
It's recommended you wear a hijab when visiting your client. We've had incidents of inmates spitting at female lawyers.
You want to represent the head recruiter for 9/11.
Mohamedou Ould Slahi, the Mauritanian held in Guantanamo. He recruited the guys who flew your friend's plane into the South Tower.
He put those men on my husband's plane?
I'm gonna make him pay.
In the event the detainee lunges for you, push back away from the table. We'll get in there as quick as we can.
I'm Nancy Hollander. This is my associate. We wish to represent you.
We are seeking the death penalty, but if we miss something, this guy goes home. Let's get to it.
So the next film we're going to review is The Mauritanian, directed by Kevin Macdonald. And Jim and Steph saw this in advance of its release. So Jim, do you want to tell us a little bit about the film?
Yeah, so the film is about a man from Mauritania, no surprise there, who was held in Guantanamo. It's based on a real story, and I think in the real case he was held for 14 years without charge, as seemed to typically happen with Guantanamo Bay. And the film is based upon a memoir of his from 2015, and Guantanamo Diary, and the author and the subject of this film is Mohamedou Ould Slahi. And basically what it does is it follows his initial arrest, capture by the US authorities, transport to Guantanamo, and the process of the legal battle for getting him out, and his then subsequent trial when it eventually comes about. And the main players in this are Tahar Rahim, who plays Slahi, Jodie Foster plays his lawyer Nancy Hollander, and then on the prosecution side of things, working for the US military, looking to imprison Slahi fully and, you know, convict him of the crimes he is accused of, which is essentially recruiting the terrorists who carried out 9/11. We've got Benedict Cumberbatch as Lieutenant Couch, I think it is, who is a member of the military, but he has law qualifications and thus is basically an army lawyer. So it basically follows the development of the case, the evidence or indeed lack thereof, against Slahi, his experience in detention, and the legal battle going in parallel to either convict or free him. So I've seen this along with Steph. Steph, what did you make of the film?
I really like the film as much as you can like a film about these issues and this story. It's one of those films that makes you go down a certain rabbit hole with these political topics, because, you know, as soon as after I'd seen it, the one thing that really kind of stuck in my mind is there's not really been a lot of films about Guantanamo Bay. You know, not a lot of ones in the last few years. The most famous one, I think, still to this day, would be A Few Good Men, but that was, you know, it was pre 9/11. Mm-hmm. And then you have in the 2010s you have Camp. One of the ones that come to mind is Camp X-Ray with Kristen Stewart, about 6-7 years ago, and then you have well, most recently in snippet form you have it being talked about a little bit in Vice, and I think this is actually the first film that I've seen that actually has the nerve to finally kind of condemn what had been happening in America and what is still happening with Guantanamo Bay. I think it was argued, I've seen a few reviews after Vice's release, that this is, you know, done a similar thing. I would greatly disagree with that. I don't think that did anything near to what this film has done. I think because it is based on Mohamedou Ould Slahi's experiences through his book, through his autobiography, I think that you learn so much that you wish that you really didn't know. But I think that it's a reminder of all the sort of omission that exists with talking about these things in cinema. You have, I remember kind of when I was falling down this rabbit hole of the Guantanamo Bay's representation in cinema, after seeing this, you know, in every other form that it's been shown, there's a way to sort of humanize the idea of the military's conduct and the way to kind of explain why this was happening and make it seem almost that the American military in Cuba were the victims of this ordeal, which is it's quite laughable, really, in a way, when you look into especially when you see films like this and you see kind of behind the shutters of what's been going on. But I think that the performances in this film are unbelievable, especially Mohamedou. I think that he does so well and I haven't, to be honest, I haven't read his autobiography, but it compelled me to order it as soon as possible to kind of see where this is going, see what the film is kind of carried on and emphasised from this story. So I think if anything, it keeps you. It's definitely a political part of cinema that you shouldn't miss. It's something that that goes in and out in different depths and it's never been explored before, and it's something that definitely stays with you. So I think in a sense with political films, that for me the main thing that it wants you to do is it wants you to engage and with these things, and I think you can't even really call it recent history when it's something that is still very much in existence today. So I think that and the timing of the film as well is very interesting, because we have new presidency. We have Joe Biden as the new American president, and I think the film's just a constant reminder of the fact that there was campaigns for its closure during the Obama administration, which never came to. I don't even know how many people until they see this film would be aware, because I don't think that was heavily really in the news. I don't remember much about that. So it's all almost like this: we're being forced to bury something that's very much still alive today, and it's something that I think that it's been written in this time to sort of finally kind of. There's a lot of activism, I would say, in this film. There's a lot of truth that it wants to explore, and I just think that the way it's done, it doesn't let you kind of hide behind things anymore. I think especially because it's it's the first film to talk about it that's had a mixed range of like directors and writers, and Kevin Macdonald is a Scottish director, so I think the fact that it's got this kind of mixed board of people exploring this issue and it's not centered through American filmmakers makes it very much more on the path to condemn the actions of America, which I think that it needed to do.
It's interesting. There's a few things this film does which I'm quite impressed by. I think what's quite interesting about it is it's one of the only things I can think of that I've watched. Now, and I've not watched everything, so I'm sure somebody would probably comment with, like, what the hell are you talking about, Jim? This film did it, like, last week or something. But it's one of the only films I can remember recently which has depicted torture in quite the way that it does. And it does it in a way which I think gets across quite how debilitating and horrific it is without being graphic. Now, that's not to say there aren't graphic elements to it, but some of that, frankly, comes from the filmmaking, right? And the way that some of this is depicted, and then even the lens choices between when the Mohamedou character is being tortured and then when it, mercifully at some point ceases for a bit. The filmmaking choices, I think, communicate quite well how disorienting that is and why it is pursued, and how inhumane it actually is. So I think that's quite interesting in terms of how it presents perspectives. I think the way it deals with Mohamedou's character is also interesting. He's shown to be, I think, an unreliable narrator, but not in the kind of like typical deceptive sense that you usually have that done in cinema. It's more just, stuff happened a long time ago. You can't remember it very well. Like, that's really all, So I think that the way it does all that is quite interesting. I think politically it's actually quite an interesting film as well. In particular, what I'm thinking of is the way it contrasts how little arguably changes across different administrations of the US. It very pointedly lingers on a portrait of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney at one point. Later on, those portraits are replaced, but much the same stuff is going on, and the film kind of goes out of its way to actually show that happening. I think the performances in the film are really good. I think Tahar Rahim, as with so much stuff he is in, and I think my first knowledge of him was Jack Odiar's A Prophet, and I think he's excellent in this film. Everybody around him, I think they do a good job. I think it's reasonably by the numbers, if I'm being honest. But I think the topic you're dealing with, this unlawful detention of people at Guantanamo, is where the film gets its punch from. And I think, fortunately, his performance, solidifies that. I think the rest of them are good performances. We've got good, experienced actors here, particularly in Jodie Foster and Benedict Cumberbatch, right? So you would expect to get a good performance out of them. Now, having dealt with the serious stuff, I am going to go a lot more flippant for a short period. Can we please have people stop having Benedict Cumberbatch try to do an American accent? I beg of every filmmaker on the face of the planet, please. And I just about, in the midst of this really serious film, I just about did a spit take and laughed when at one point, right, so I've got this written down here, at one point, they describe Mohamedou, who is associated with Ted, and you can read his book to figure out, to see the full extent of it, but he's been in touch at various points with people associated with terrorists, and at one point I think he's described as the Al-Qaeda Forrest Gump. He's everywhere you look. And I just about did a spit take, because quite frankly, Benedict Cumberbatch's southern accent here sounds like Forrest Gump. It's not good. I'm sorry. Stop getting this man to do American accents. It didn't do it for me. It just didn't do it for me. So it's the film is not without its small minor issues. I think it is a testament, however, to the filmmaking, and in particular that central performance of Tahar Rahim, that such small things like Benedict Cumberbatch's terrible southern accent didn't particularly bother me. I think it's a very, I know people say this about films all the time, it's a powerful film, but I think it is, and I think it gets across quite how bad this situation is, and quite how ignored it is as well. And I think that's also highlighted in the filmmaking, right? Because the contrast between the way that the law officers are presented in America, and I think it's somewhere in New Mexico, I think, where Nancy Hollander works, and then these kind of very brightly lit, saturated colours of the coast of Cuba in the case of Guantanamo Bay. It's even highlighting that contrast. It's a completely different world. People don't pay attention to it. It's in the middle of nowhere to the average American, and I think it gets that all across quite well and in quite subtle ways. But yeah, just don't have Benedict Cumberbatch do an American accent.
Well, I think you make a good point there, Jim, and we can all agree, Benedict, keep with your native accent. So, but do watch The Mauritanian. It is on Glasgow Film Festival, and then after that, it'll be, I think, at Glasgow at Home, Glasgow Film at Home, other various sources. You can check it out in the UK and in the US.